ones.
There you go.
Exactly.
Very, very common thing. I think we're all in that mess. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So, well, we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to thank everybody for coming and welcome you to our division meeting. And what I'd like to do is go right into Bill's program. And then after that, we can cover any of the division stuff. And that way, the guests that don't care about division, because you're not part of our division, you know, you can bug on out or stick around, whatever you'd like. But Bill has become a good friend, a fellow model railroader, as most of you know, and MMR has a beautiful model railroad. And I want to get a group of guys to come down and operate with you sometime, Bill.
I think that'd be wonderful.
When
I
things
just started
get back.
operating again. It's been almost a year.
Yeah, and that'd
We
be
had an
nice.
operation last Friday.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it was a small one.
Okay.
I think we ran maybe 6 trains, but it wasn't too bad.
Okay.
I had expected after a year to have a laundry list of things to fix, and it was only 6 items, so it wasn't bad.
Wow.
So,
And how many people do you normally have for an op session?
usually about 10 guests, and then another couple of fellows to help me do the work.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'll get with you a little later on and see what we do for the summer, maybe.
I mean, when you take over a yard job on a strange railroad, that becomes a real challenge.
Yes.
You know, and I like to have one of my fellows that usually does a lot of the yard work along next to the guest, because it's a tricky thing, and I don't think this hobby should be stressful. I think it ought to be fun, you know, and the way it gets to be fun is if you have somebody working right with you, you can turn to and say, well, how do I handle this coal train now, or what do I do with VL2, you know, and you know, the answers come up quick, and it's easy to do the work.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Challenge is good, but you don't want to be stressed to the point where it's not enjoyable. You're worried about screwing up.
Right. And by the way, I tell people in my orientation, you can't break anything that I haven't already broken twice. So, I mean, I just don't worry about that kind of stuff. I enjoy the company, and having people operate the railroad makes it come alive. And that's really what I'm after. So,
right.
You want me to go ahead and start working here?
Yes. Is there any, yeah, go ahead. Anything else you want to tell the guys about yourself? Go ahead.
Well, I live over in the Detroit area, Farmington Hills, about where 8 Mile and 275 cross. And I've been building this railroad since probably 1980, actually 1990, really 1990. And it wasn't until 2003 that my kids finally moved out, and I got the rest of the basement. So a lot of this railroad is built from 2003 on. So let me share the screen here a minute. Let's see, I share sound, optimize, share. Okay.
And if you guys would just mute yourself while Bill's putting the program on.
Yeah.
And Bill, do you want questions, or would you prefer someone to write the question in the chat, and we'll let Terry handle that?
I want it written in triplicate and sent by, no, I'm kidding. No, questions during the, I mean, there's only what, 18, 20 guys here? Yeah, let's talk. It's just more of a conversation. It's more fun that way.
Sure. That's fine.
Yeah, and one of the things is I can't see the chat room while I'm talking. So,
well, I was going to have Terry. Terry could read the question for you, but that's fine. Don't just let anybody ask, but we'll stay muted while we're not asking questions. So.
Yeah, but Terry interrupted me. I'll try and I talk fast, so my apologies. But I'll try and pause every once in a while. And Terry, you can say, "Hey, that slide, 15 back." And somebody had a question on so.
All right, we'll do that.
All right, thank you. I like to start my presentation with this slide. It's a picture that Griff Teller painted in 1953, and it's probably the only Pennsylvania calendar picture of the Pennsy Panhandle. This is the area model. That's the bridge there in the background, and we're actually standing on the West Virginia side of the river, and across the river is Steubenville, Ohio. And this is down here, you guys can see my cursor, I think. Right down here is the last steam engine ever put on a Pennsy calendar. It's sort of a sad thing, but this is the area model. It's very interesting. Behind us is a helper grade, and in front of us is the big industrial city of Steubenville. It had a lot of things that I liked about railroads. So let's talk about this. A lot of people ask me, what is the Panhandle? What the hell is that part of the Pennsylvania Railroad? If you look, here's Pittsburgh, and there are two lines coming out of Pittsburgh going west. One is this one up at top that I don't have a red line on. That's called the Fort Wayne because it went up through Fort Wayne, Indiana. That's where a lot of the passenger traffic ran. The Panhandle actually went through Columbus, Ohio, Indianapolis, and out to St. Louis, and also had a secondary line that went up through Logansport into the backside of Chicago and actually tied into the Milwaukee Road eventually at the very north end. A lot of the freight traffic came down the Panhandle while the passenger traffic used the Fort Wayne. And I model right down here in the middle of the screen. Here's Weirton Junction right here where this line comes up. And that's the area I'm modeling right in there. Why the Panhandle? Well, it had very interesting and intense operation. I like intense operation. I mean, I have a fondness for branch lines and narrow gauge and stuff, but if you actually try and operate it very much, it becomes relatively, I'm gonna insult some people, but please bear with me. To me, it becomes relatively boring. You know, you could model a Monon Railroad running down through the middle of Indiana, but there's one train a day. It's kind of a so what type deal. This thing had a lot of traffic on it. It was very interesting. And yeah, hey, I'm an opinionated son of a bitch too, so bear with me.
That's fine.
So it also had attractive online industries. I'm not a big fan of grain elevators, although I think they're neat. I don't have a big love for them. I like coal mines and steel mills. Had a wide variety of trains, very interesting sets of trains going through here. Moderate scenery. I didn't have to craft the Alleghenies or the Rockies. This stuff was all rolling hills in the West Virginia and Western Pennsylvania highlands. And the LDEs, or layout design elements, were closely spaced together. You know, you read a lot in the press about those things, about, well, you need some dead space in between. Well, I don't buy it. I'll go a little bit more into that in a bit here. And the contrarian in me says, oh, this is kind of cool. It's not a very well-known part of the Pennsylvania Railroad or very often modeled. So it's kind of cool to be the one guy at the Pennsylvania Railroad Historical Convention that models west of Pittsburgh. And everybody else is modeling Horseshoe Curve. You know, it's kind of fun. So I kind of like being a different guy. Now, if you look at the first 50 miles of the Panhandle, Pittsburgh's over here on the right-hand side. And you really have a freight line coming across through Ohio River on the Ohio Connecting Bridge down through Scully Yard. And then the Panhandle main line comes out of the middle of Pittsburgh over here, across the Monongahela Railroad on the Panhandle Bridge, and they join at Carnegie. So basically, you have freight coming this way and passenger trains coming this way. They join at Carnegie, they climb up to Burgettstown, and then they drop down out of Burgettstown back to the Ohio River. The Ohio is very confused in this area. It starts running north out of Pittsburgh, and then goes up 50 miles and turns around, comes back south. And the railroad, instead of following that railroad around, decided to go right over this highlands right here in the center of the West Virginia Panhandle. That's where the Panhandle Division got its name. And I model from Burgettstown right here at the top of the hill down to Weirton Junction, across the Ohio River and into Steubenville, and as far as Mingo Junction. And there were all kinds of branches and stuff going on here, and it was kind of fun. And that makes the railroad kind of interesting. There are 4 towers. Burgett's is the eastmost tower, then Collier, Weirton, and Mingo. I talked to the Weirton Junction signal maintainer at one point in time. He'd retired long ago, and I bought his files off of him, which was an interesting document, a series of documents. It went back to like 1914 and went all the way up to like 1968 or so. And he said that Weirton Junction was a real cluster, and he used a U.S. Marines term. It rhymed with duck, but he said it was a real cluster. And he said if you did something really bad on the Pennsylvania Railroad and they wanted to punish you, they would assign you to be the tower operator at Weirton Junction. So I try not to make my model railroad be that way, but it is a busy place.
Hey, Bill, there's a question that came up wanting to know how many actual miles are modeled.
Well, this is about 24 miles from Burgettstown to Mingo. And I have compressed that into 3 scale miles of model trackage. So it's 50 miles out here to Mingo, from Pittsburgh to Mingo. And I took the second half of that 50 miles. Okay. Now you'll note there's also a tunnel here. There were actually 10 tunnels between Pittsburgh and Columbus, Ohio, and 6 pusher grades. So it was a rugged piece of railroad. Nobody would expect that, but Southern Ohio is a real hilly area, and quite a few tunnels. Now, tunnel number 4 is the only one that I model, and that was actually daylighted in 1942, and I'll show you some of that stuff. So why do I model 1939? Because that's my modeling point. Well, it was all steam. I don't have to deal with any of those diesel things. It was simple steam too. I don't have any duplexes. There's no T1s running around, no Q2s or any of that stuff. And the headlight was in the right place. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. It had this interesting mixture of passenger cars. Both lightweights and heavyweights were mixed together. The lightweight cars came onto the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1938. So you can see down here, that's really the start of my sweet spot. And the traffic volume went out of control during World War II, right in this area here, 1942. And I wanted to kind of hit before then because traffic volume, that gets kind of scary when you think about what they actually were running. And then you also have some older freight equipment still knocking around at that time. So it's kind of a fun time to model. So that was my target time. Now, when I talk about the headlight being in the right place, you have to be an experienced Pennsy modeler, and I don't expect you guys to know what I'm talking about. But this is what it is. This is a pre-war passenger engine, a K4 Pacific. You will note that the headlight stands in front of the firebox. You have this lovely boiler front, and it's what they call a chicken coop pilot. It looks great to me. During World War II, the Nazi saboteurs, I'm absolutely sure, moved the headlight to the back of the firebox and put the generator in front, then put this ugly platform across the front of the engines and put a cast iron pilot on it. It looks terrible to me. This is the look I like. I hate this post-war look. So I like to kind of aim here in the 1930s, late 1930s for my railroad. That's the reason I'm where I am and why I am. Now, some poor engineer, I expect an apprentice engineer, was given a dispatcher sheet and told to create this chart. This is 1941. This is 1 month before Pearl Harbor. This is a real sheet. And the way to read this is you have 24 hours across here on the horizontal axis, and you have miles from basically the Scully area where those 2 lines come together, the passenger and the freight lines in Pittsburgh, down to Columbus, Ohio. And over here on the left-hand side is the grade profile. The area I have marked in red is the area I'm modeling. So you can see what my area is. I actually model from the top of the grade here down into the Ohio River Valley to Mingo Junction. And then this is the running tracks that the dispatcher had to work with down through here. And these are the trains across the area. The solid lines represent freight trains. The large dashed lines you can see on here represent passenger trains. The lightweight lines represent work trains and light engine moves. And if you trace it carefully, you can see the helpers dropping back down off the grades. It's kind of interesting. Now, this is almost wartime traffic. This is a little bit ahead of when I'm modeling. There are on this chart at least 5 passenger extras. Now, Pennsy never ran passenger extras unless there was a football game or something like that going on. My speculation is that these 5 passenger extras were actually troop trains. Before the war, they weren't called mains, but they are called passenger extras on here. There's a lot of stuff being moved around. There's also an oil train being moved, and I think that started by 1938. There's oil moving from Texas going east to the New Jersey refinery. So that's all kind of interesting. It's all in this chart. The train names are at the top, and I've studied this quite a bit. I don't ask you to study it. I'm going to move past this very quickly, but it's a very interesting chart. Okay, the other thing that's neat about the Panhandle are these interesting engines. This is a rebuilt USRA 210-2. These ran on the Panhandle, and they ran up through Michigan in our area on the GR and I. About the only place you could find them. And these were really cool-looking engines. In the late 1920s, they took the USRA boilers and rebuilt them with the Pennsylvania Belpaire boiler and moved the headlight up on top. These are very handsome engines. I like this engine. This is actually one on the Panhandle near where I'm modeling. And in the 1920s, they still had the semaphore signals. Thank God that was taken care of before I'm modeling. Because modeling semaphore signals on a signal bridge is terror. I'm sorry, just wouldn't do it. Now, this is a photograph from 1939 of the area I'm modeling. the state of Pennsylvania hired a pilot and a photographer to go out and shoot pictures of the agricultural land. You can picture in your mind a guy in a biplane, and in the second seat is this guy with a bellows camera hanging over the edge of the biplane, taking these pictures. These are available online. At one time, it was called Pen Pilot. I don't think it's called that anymore, but if you dig around, you can probably come up with these pictures. The entire state of Pennsylvania, the rural areas of Pennsylvania were photographed. You can see East Broad Top trains running and all kinds of stuff. And this is an area that I dug into and found some pictures of. And this is the line I'm modeling right here. This is approaching the tunnel. The tunnel is right off to the right, the Dinsmore Tunnel. And these engines are going eastbound. You can see there's the pusher. All these cars have some sort of black substance in them. They're all uniform, and there's the lead engine. I would speculate that this might be a coal train going east. So kind of an interesting picture. All that sounded interesting to me. And then I got to the industries and I thought, oh, this is a cool place. You got these very simple coal mines. They didn't do much coal washing in the 1930s. They may have sorted it, but they may not have. You can see there's a couple mines here. They're just basically the track runs, the mine track runs into the structure. There's a couple tipples underneath here, and they just dump it into the mine, into the hopper cars. The picture of the Vernier Coal Company is pretty interesting. It's brand new. These are mine cars in this gondola standing on end, waiting to be unloaded for this mine. It's just a neat picture. And of course, you've got these neat steel mills. You've got the Weirton steel. I don't attempt to model this. I model it as though you were standing here looking north, and all you see is some tracks winding off into some structures. And then there's also the Mingo Junction Works, which is primarily a background structure on my railroad, but interesting models. And the primarily design elements of my railroad are Weirton Junction, where you have this neat steel mill and big yard, and Steubenville, where it's a bunch of industries, and you got this neat bridge connecting them. So this is the heart of the railroad that I model right here. Now, I do like operations. I like prototype operations. I find that, first of all, it's fun to enjoy the comradeship of others. You really get to know somebody if you spend an afternoon operating with them. It's kind of fun. Sometimes you can make a guess at their IQ, but most of the time it's kind of fun. And it's the only way I can make my railroad come alive. I can't do it by myself. I can't run enough trains. I don't have enough fingers to run all the controllers to make 5, 6, 7, or 8 engines running at the same time, pass each other, move around each other, swing the trains back and forth. Operations is the only way I can make it come alive. And it also helps me share the vision of the railroad I built. People will walk away from this from an operating session with a much better understanding of what this area is like and what the model railroad is attempting to achieve. So this is important to me. I don't like my operations to be terribly challenging. I don't want to make anybody have to take an IQ test before they do this stuff. It's simple, it's straightforward. Instructions are pretty clean. At least I think they are. And operations are pretty easy to get into. It's not a terribly challenging railroad. Now, the issue I had in building this railroad was to balance everything. I wanted prototype operations. I wanted some reasonably interesting scenery. I wanted good access physically to it for maintenance and so on. And I wanted a visceral impact to carry across the story of the railroad. Of course, good operations. I took the prototype track diagram and pretty much copied it, just shortened the distance between the interlocking plants. I put every crossover in. And what's interesting that I found just absolutely fascinating, I didn't know the purpose of all these crossovers really when I built it. But every crossover is used at least once in an operating session. So they're all needed where they were. Put a lot of staging in. That had to be important because of the traffic volume. And I wanted my operators to be moderately challenged, but nothing too difficult. There are no switching puzzles involved here. Now, the scenery is very moderate. Some cuts and fills. I kept my bench work narrow. I don't like to spend a lot of time making fill-in scenery between large areas that don't have track. I like to keep it to a minimum. I also wanted good accessibility. I don't always have that in all places of the railroad, unfortunately, but I did pretty reasonably well. And I wanted impact or drama in each design element. I built my scenes one right after another. If you read some of these guys, and I'll pick on Tony Custer, he's a good friend of mine, but if you read his stuff, he says, oh, you got to have a layout design element, And then you need a place for the eyes to go to sleep in between. You know, that's where I put my cornfields. And then you have another layout design element. I didn't want any of that nonsense. I think that's not really true. I think the more interesting you can make your layout, the better. And when you go away from single track and go to multiple track, like double track or in my case, triple track, you can put your layout design elements closely together as they were on the prototype. This area was settled with horse and buggies, which means that on a timetable you have stations 2 and 3 minutes apart, which is kind of cool. So I built my layout so that there were a lot of photogenic scenes, one right after the other. I utilized every inch I could, and I really minimized any transition or dead areas. And at the time I built it, I put sound in my locomotives. Now that was a little unusual back in the late 1980s, 1990s, but it's become a sort of a de facto standard. But that was an important thing to do now. Okay, so let's tour the railroad. Let's get after this a little bit. This is Weirton Tower. This is the mail train coming through. Craig Wilson took this picture and added some smoke to the scene. I don't really have smoke units in my engines, unfortunately. I wish I did, but it doesn't happen. I like the picture. Now, this is the layout plan. This is what was published in Great Model Railroads back in 2010. Kind of hard to look at. I'm going to walk you through this real quickly, and we're going to start with the upper level. And I put the numbers in east to west sequence. This staging yard right here is above your head. Well, most people of normal height anyway. I have a couple tall operators that look right into it, but you know, that's the way it goes. This is Pittsburgh out here. This is the east end of the railroad. Number one, right here is Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh is actually a double level staging. There's actually 1.5 that swings underneath it. But both these levels come together right here at number 2, where the railroad enters the scenic area. It's triple track through Burgettstown. Burgettstown is an important area, but this is only maybe 16 inches wide. So get some perspective on it. The railroad swings around and it goes through into a mining district where the Francis Mine and the Bertha Mine are located, and then swings down into tunnel number 4. Now, tunnel number 4 acts for me like a transition area to go between what is a double level area right here down to a single level area here at Hanlon. Now, Hanlon was an important station for the Pennsylvania Railroad, and they did a lot of milk pickup there. You'll see some more of that. And then I swing down into the Collier Interlocking plant, and through Collier, it goes from 3 tracks to 4, where you have this outside track on the right-hand side that becomes a long lead into Weirton Junction. Red number 7 here is the key. Look at number 7, and I'll switch. Here's red number 7 again. This is where those 4 tracks come out. They swing around a big curve. I usually have to tell people this is not horseshoe curve. It is a 4-track main line, but it's not horseshoe curve. And into the Weirton Junction area. Now, Weirton Yard tends to be a pretty busy place, but it's only accessible through this 4th track. So if you're running Collier Interlocking, you've got to get trains down and onto this track. Small classification yard, arrival departure tracks, and a yard where they connect with the mill traffic. And you go into Weirton Junction. Now, I'll show you pictures of all this stuff as we go. We'll go through the same east to west sequence. But from here, the railroad launches across the Ohio River and into Steubenville. And Steubenville is fairly industrial. You can see there's a number of industries that actually go through the backdrop, through the structures. Here's Steubenville Station, and then we go into Mingo Junction. Now, there was about 3 actual miles between Steubenville and Mingo Junction, but I had no room to do that, so I had to sort of squash the 2 together. Now, pay no attention. Let me see if I can get my cursor to work here. Pay no attention to this curving track right here. This track is used for continuous run and for Wying trains to restage them into the Columbus and West staging area right here. Now, I have a roundhouse here. This is the Mingo Junction roundhouse. It is only really scenery, and it's a nice backdrop building. I mean, after all, engines never came out of the roundhouse and went directly on trains. The roundhouse was used to repair engines. After they were repaired, they were stored outside the roundhouse on the garden tracks. I now have about 6 garden tracks here, or on the ready tracks here. Now, this part of the railroad is operated by the operator picking up the engine and backing it out of the engine facility and onto a waiting train here in what is really a staging yard. You can see it connects over here to what is the Weirton Steel connection. And this is the loads in, empties out area for coal. So a load of coal goes into the Weirton Steel mill and comes out of Mingo Junction yard. So it's a pretty, it allows me to operate pretty intense coal operations if I want to. I generally only do about one train for that because there's a lot of other stuff going on. So let's start with pictures. And by the way, I have some videos. I've taken some videos. I would appreciate at the end of this clinic some honest evaluation about whether the videos add anything to the clinic. Okay, this is PH9 going by Burgettstown Tower. Burgettstown Tower is sitting here. Real Burgettstown Tower look like this. I keep pushing wrong buttons here. I am a cheater. I use the Walther's wood tower to represent this wood tower. This is a standard Pensy wood tower. Unfortunately, Walther's one has the wrong roof. It's not quite wide enough. It only has 2 windows instead of 3, but it's a standard at this point in time. And when I get time, I'll replace it, but I don't know if I'll ever have time in my lifetime to do that. So that's the way it goes. Some compromise is necessary. Burgettstown is a small town built on a relatively narrow shelf. This is the team track and lead to the freight house. Lynn Brothers Lumber sits over here. There's a small coal patch set of houses here that's for some of the mines in the area, and a couple small industries. It's a very small, narrow town, but it has a great deal of importance to operations because that's where the pusher cuts off. Now, what's happening here is the pusher is cut off an eastbound train, and it's coming back through the interlocking plant and swinging over to the westbound main. There's 2 tracks here, the lighter rail track here, which is the 101 secondary, and then the eastbound main, track 1 right here. This is track 2. That is the westbound main, and the helper's going to drift back west after having pushed the train east. Craig Wilson took this picture. He was on the helper. He tended to stop the helper about every 15 feet and take a picture. It took a long time to get the helper back for the next train, but that was all right. I still treasure his pictures. He managed to remove the steel beam that went across the top of this picture and add clouds. I thought that was rather nice of him to do. But it still tells the story of the helper coming back through. We get to the mines. The first mine we come to is the Francis mine. Here's a couple pictures of it. This is a very early picture. This is a later picture. You can see that the trestle has become more robust. The Francis mine paid the Pennsylvania Railroad $12 a month for the air rights over the main line. Well, I had to replicate that, and that's what I've got in the big picture here. This is my Francis mine. You can see the access to the mine head goes across the main line, just like the prototype does. Bertha Road. This is probably the westbound Cincinnati Limited coming through. And then we get to the Bertha mine. And once again, I try to be as prototypical as I can. Years and years, I looked for a picture of the Bertha mine. Couldn't find one, so I cobbled up something from a Walther's coal mine kit. It does still scream Walther's coal mine in that it has the triple windows and the corrugated steel sides. And then about 2 years ago, a picture surfaced, and it was a picture of Dinsmore, and when you blew it up, you could actually find the Bertha mine head, the tipple right here. The mine track goes back and forth in a big switchback arrangement up through the town. But this was what the actual Bertha mine looked like. But this is very early. You can see here's a Pensy engine with a headlight in the center of the boiler. Very unusual. It was Lines West style back in the 1914s to do that. They since got all our engines rebuilt, but that's the way it goes. So this is a to-do sometime or other. I got to rebuild this mine to look like this. At some point in time, you may see this structure on eBay. So anyway, here's Dinsmore Tunnel. This is the helper drifting back through the tunnel. This tunnel, here's the actual tunnel. It was cut in 1892, 1893. A very narrow bore. And because of that, passenger trains would go through, and there were reports of observation cars scraping their marker lights on the sides of the tunnel. It was that skinny. Well, as time went on, the Pennsylvania Railroad and industry in general got better earth moving machines, and they actually bypassed this tunnel. In 1942, they bypassed this tunnel. They cut a new line in here. You can see the old line. This tunnel still sits there underneath the town of Dinsmore someplace. I've not been able to find the tunnel openings, but evidence of that tunnel persists to this day. The Pennsylvania Railroad had this whole class of cabooses with sloping cupolas, and it was all because of this crazy tunnel at Dinsmore. So it's kind of interesting. These were the standard Pensy wood cabooses, and they just persisted with that cupola after that fact, even after daylighting. Hanlon Station is the next station. Here's a picture of the actual Hanlon Station. It was a Class C standard depot. For a little while, a company called Mountain West made a kit that matched that plan. So I got a couple of them. Here's my Hanlon Station. You'll note in the background here, there's a milk house. It's got refrigerator type doors and some milk cans out in back here, along with a horse and buggy. Well, I had to have that. Some poor Lindbergh refrigerator car. I don't know if you guys remember the Lindbergh refrigerator car line, or the Lindbergh car line, but I cut one up, and its doors are now sacrificed as part of this structure here. So that's my milk house, my one and only milk house. Eastbound trains would stop long enough to load a few milk cans into their refrigerator cars. And that's something I've copied a little bit of. Now, next is Collier Interlocking. Again, it's one of these wood interlocking towers. It was a standard Pensy tower. I keep hoping somebody will bring out a laser kit. It's 4 windows wide, but the Walther stand-in is helping me out here. Collier Tower was an important location. In fact, on my model railroad, it winds up being the center of a lot of interesting operation. If you look at this picture carefully, you'll see right here on the right-hand side, there's a coal shifter working the mine. It's in the foreground. The caboose for that train is sitting right over here underneath the signal bridge. Meanwhile, there is an eastbound coal train moving up the hill. There's a push. As you can see, the pusher on the back. Coal train stretches around the curve. And right at the top here, you can see there's another coal train waiting to come down, waiting on that eastbound coal train to clear the interlocking plant. Very typical. This was a grab shot during an operating session. And here's another one during an operating session. Again, the same sort of scenario plays out. Over here is a local switching out the Collier steel plant. Meanwhile, eastbound, there's this big train of plate steel. It's about 35, 40 cars going east. There'll be a pusher on the other end of it. And waiting here at the interlocking plant to get through the plant is a downbound coal train, probably headed into Weirton Steel. A very, very common operation. If you're the operator at Collier Interlocking plant, you get to do a lot of rail fanning. It's kind of an interesting area. Just outside of Collier, on the west of it, is Meckling Bridge. It still exists. There's a hiking trail across it right now. People hike back and forth probably without a clue of what was there. It was an interesting bridge because there was a river on one side and a road on the other. Good luck on getting a truck through that clearance there, but it was an interesting bridge. This is a pair of pushers on this train. Sometimes some of my trains are heavy enough they require 2 pushers. You have to be careful of that, though. You don't want to over push or you'll put cars on the ground. Right just west of there is the little Atlas No. 2 coal loader. And it's just a truck dump. It's not very important, but it gets switched every day. A couple cars come out of there and mine run coal. And just a nice little operation. And of course, there's a water bridge. Now, I knew there was a water bridge here because I looked at the blueprints and it said water bridge. Oh, got to be a standard Pensy water bridge, right? So I get a standard Pensy water bridge and install it. And not more than 18 months later do I find a picture of the real water bridge, which looked nothing, of course, like it. So another chore to do. This was an interesting operation. You can see that there are the spouts. There's the track 1 and 2 spout, and there's the spout for tracks 3 and 4. It's swinging over from tender to tender. But what was also interesting about this was the coal that was delivered. Now, this was an early, probably from the 1870s to the 1920s. Tenders were so small they couldn't get very far with a coal load on them. And they would recoal on the way up the slope. And they took mine run coal. The mine head is right behind this Lewis Finley Coal Company building. The mine head is right there. And they would take mine run coal, drag it out here, and dump it through these chutes into the tenders. Well, you know, that was probably terrible on the steam locomotives. You don't really want mine run coal. But it was kind of an interesting thing. And this remained in service up through 1958 or so until steam stopped running on the Pensy. The coal part of this was not in service by 1939. Tenders were larger and they just simply ran past this, but you still needed water. There are anecdotal stories of trains eastbound that would stop here for water and get the pusher attached, which is kind of how we operate my railroad. Now, our next point along the line is Weirton Junction. This was an important tower. This is the place they would consign you if you were really bad and did something terrible, because this was evidently a bad job. I don't know. I thought it was kind of an interesting looking tower, and on my railroad, it turns out to be a pretty good job. This is my model of the tower. The building immediately to the right here is really the compressor house. This was what they call an electro-pneumatic interlocking plant, where air was actually used to move the points, but the tower operator used a pistol grip machine to change the air pressure here and there. Now, if you're operating on my railroad, this is what the tower looks like. It's the first one of my 4 towers that has had a new panel put in. And it's not pistol grips, but it looks, I think, a good bit better than some of the older panels I've used. And the tower is really standing right behind the green building here. So, and you have a good old time phone, so you can call up the guy next, the next tower down the line and tell him what you got lined up for him. Now let's talk about Weirton Yard just real quick. This is another Craig Wilson picture. He was running the mail train. This is number 10, eastbound mail. It's got about 2 K4s and 20 cars of mail. And it generally gets over the railroad pretty fast. Now, I was running the staging yard during this operating session. I had set up for number 10 to come into one of the tracks. And I figured it would be there pretty soon. And it didn't show up, and it didn't show up, it didn't show up. Finally, I ducked out from staging to see where the hell this train was. And it only made it halfway around the railroad because Craig Wilson was stopping it, putting his camera down and taking these pictures. I didn't begrudge him because these pictures are really kind of nice. Then he took them home and added smoke to them. And I thought that was pretty cool. This is the east end of Weirton Yard. There's dual leads here. You can see there's dual switch leads. That's the east end switcher right there. And this is probably VL2 or VL6, a manifest freight. Probably about 20 to 30 cars with a pusher down at the back end there. This gives you a good idea what the yard looks like. Here's a step back scene so you can see what things look like if you really walk down the basement. I mean, it's nice having all these closely cropped pictures that look realistic. But I think if you're going to go on a layout tour, sometimes it's fun just to stand back and say, well, what do things really look like? And this is Travis Stavick from Cincinnati working Weirton Yard. He's running the shifter down there, 7606. Here's another picture of the East End job, tying onto a cut of cars on the receiving yard. And here's the decapod getting ready to pull a train east. He's getting ready to couple up. Now I have a little video, and hopefully I can share it, and it'll work right for us. This is a commercial local, PH120. He's heading eastbound. He's getting ready to take off. And we'll see if we can hear some sounds. Tell me if you guys can hear sounds. The yard shifter is going to come into the scene in just a minute here. He's going to couple onto some cars in the arrival yard and pull them back. I think the video gives you a better idea what it kind of looks like when you're actually in the layout room watching the trains move. All right. Okay, the other end of the yard has this little shifter who trims yard tracks and moves hopper car or moves cabooses around and that kind of stuff. Cabin cars actually for Pensy. It's 060, and it's all the muscle you need at this end of the yard. Now, the New Cumberland branch comes into this yard from the steel mill, and it has a pretty interesting operation. Over here on the left-hand side is the acid plant. There's a tin mill right next door to this, and a lot of acid comes in these cars and is processed and used in tinning of steel. Now, Weirton Mill is a pretty big place. It's a huge mill. It runs north-south. The Pennsylvania Railroad is kind of where we're standing in this picture. And when you look at the mill, there's no way I could model this. I'd love to, but I just don't have enough room. If you look at the mill, though, it becomes very simple in that you don't see all this. You just see the end of the mill where the tracks go. So I kind of cheated here again. And this is all there is of Weirton Mill, unfortunately, on my layout. Now, I have a small layout, so this kind of works for me. Right here are the coil cars coming out of the rolling mill. Here are empty hopper cars that will be replaced by loads somewhere in the activity. And here's a local coming out. Over here is the tin mill. There's tin steel coming out of here. And this is all flowing into the main yard. Let's see if I get to work. Yeah, here's the roll of steel coming out. There's about 20 cars of rolled steel behind that building front. So it's a significant pull. And the plate steel comes out as well. And this actually shows the main line where the yard ties in here. You can see the grade starts right about there where the crossover comes in. And here we're switching out some of the rolled steel. There's the road engine sitting waiting to get onto the steel train. Backing down on the steel train. And this is just a series of shots that Craig Wilson took that I thought were kind of nice. I like this one. This is another class of 210-2. This is not the USRA 210-2. This is the Lines West version of a decapod. They actually added an extra truck back here and a bigger boiler, but it was not nearly as efficient an engine as the original Pensy decapods. And here the helpers sitting at Weirton Junction. Usually sit here near the tower. There's actually two here. Usually you use one at a time, but yeah, it's depends on what the train is. They're 210-0s. In fact, that's really the engine of the corner of the realm here in the Weirton area. Here's a picture of them pushing up the hill, pushing on the back of that coil steel train. It winds up being about 35 or 40 cars. So it's a pretty significant lift. The grade is 2%. And you wouldn't believe, 2% doesn't sound like a lot of grade, but you wouldn't believe what an impact 2% grade has on the ability of a locomotive to pull a train. It's just amazing what the impact is. Yeah, Terry. Oh, you're muted. Terry, you're muted.
You know,
Terry?
sometimes the space bar works and sometimes it doesn't.
There you go. Keep going.
Got a question. Wanted to know how deep is the Weirton Mill on your layout?
Yeah, behind those buildings,
Yep.
it's about 20 feet.
Okay.
It's extremely deep. In other words, you can push a 30-car coal train back into there and not get to the other end of it.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's significantly deep. There's 3 tracks that are very deep in there, and the others are stubs. But that's, I think there's really 4 tracks, and one's a stub, and the other 3 are really, really deep. So I actually create 2 trains out of that mill, maybe 3, which is kind of nice to do. I mean, it's a great source of traffic. Okay, now if we go back to the west end of the yard. Here's a local coming out. This is a commercial local. This is a westbound local. The video you saw was an eastbound local. Here's Weirton Tower, and he's coming across the interlocking plant. And he's going to go across the Ohio River and into Steubenville, Ohio. It's going to go by this cool structure. This was standard slag. And standard slag took the steel mill slag and crushed it, put it back in hopper cars to be used for, I guess, cement bricks and other things. But it was a neat building. I have my version of it right here. You can see the start of my bridge. Now, my bridge is a pretty close copy in structure. Here's the real one at the bottom, and the model one is above, but it's just a little bit shortened in length. I don't have quite as many sections in the middle here as the prototype, but I have enough, I think, that it has the impact. It took a whole bunch of Central Valley girders and 3 Atlas O-gauge bridges to build this thing, and a good winter time to do it. I did it a side at a time and then hooked the 2 sides together. And it is amazingly rigid. I was really shocked. The tracks actually ride on a aluminum U-channel. I don't know what they use it for. I think it's a cap over a plywood edge, but they're on U-channels. And the aluminum will sag between these 2 supports, which are 4 feet apart. The aluminum will sag more than the plastic structure does. I had to glue the aluminum up to the plastic to keep it from sagging. So it just gives you an idea that it's quite a rigid structure. Very interesting. Now, when you come off the bridge, you're in Steubenville. You're on the Ohio side of the river now. This is PH 11 coming into North Steubenville. By the way, the curves are all super elevated just ever so slightly. It's visually important, not necessarily operationally, but visually important to have a little bit of super elevation on the curve. By the way, this, you learn something all the time. And I had this as a screensaver for a long time. And I kept looking at this picture thinking there's something wrong with it. And what's wrong with it is there are no joint bars on this track. And it really bothered me after a while. So I have since gone back to this track and put joint bars in where if I take this picture again, they'll all show up. I used a knife to make a bit of a dent in the top of the rail and put a plastic joint bar on the outside, and it looks much better. But that's just my personal craziness. Steubenville has a pretty good industrial area. Here's a local pulling into the Steubenville yard, going across the depot crossover. There really was a crossover through the depot, and this was quite an interesting yard. I only modeled 3 of what was 8 tracks, but I have a good number of buildings in here and industries, which is kind of fun. This is a switch job all in of itself. There's usually one guy stationed here working the cars. There are key structures in Steubenville that I had to build. One was this crazy freight house that lasted until 1966. And I had only this picture of a newspaper clipping to work from. So I built it. And not more than 2 years later, did a friend of mine find the actual damn blueprints for this thing. And it scared me. I almost didn't open the package because I didn't really want to know if I was close or not. You kind of get to the point where, no, I don't want to know. No, don't take it away. But it turned out I was pretty close. I was not bad. This used design preservation modular walls for the sides, and then I scratch built the ends. So it was a pretty easy to do from the sides, and then the scratch built roof, of course. So it's kind of fun. This structure was originally 300 feet long. The real one was. My version of it is 200 feet long, so I can't get quite as many cars into it as the prototype did. but it has capacity for eight freight cars in HO scale. There's another picture of the detail of it. It has a full interior. Since it's so open and you're pushing cars into it, I pretty much was forced into making an interior. I don't do that a lot. I'm a lazy modeler, but I had to do it in this case. Here's the 060 shifting the yard. This little guy right here with the red flag, he's a permanent addition. He's not just there for a photograph. It turns out that if you're switching this yard, your eyes are on the switcher. And as you approach the road crossing, well, your flagman's out there. That's good. Okay, you switch it and you go away. You don't look at the flagman after that. So the gates are down, the flagman's out there all the time. He's got a lonely job though. So and there are certain buildings that I thought was important. There are a number of photographs taken in Steubenville, the Steubenville Station, and right across from the station was Slim and Ernie's Diamond Cafe. Drink Royal Crown Cola, and I had to have that building, so I scratch built it over here. Here's Slim and Ernie's Diamond Cafe. I found out later from some of the locals that the railroad guys never ate at Slim and Ernie's because it was too high scale. It was air conditioned. It was much too expensive, you know. So they ate across the railroad tracks at a place called the Smokestack Cafe, which was really a seedy looking place. But I had to have Slim and Ernie's. A few important industries. The Ohio Foundry and Manufacturing Company was in Steubenville for years and years. And they made cast iron stoves and then later cast iron grates for gas burners, gas furnaces. And my version of it looks something like this. It was a turn of the century building with a lot of windows. They didn't believe in incandescent lighting until later on in the century. So they wanted a lot of windows. So it was a good building to put together, kind of fun. Here's another picture of it here. And in addition, I had to have the armor building here. This is an armor distribution point. You can see, here's the prototype down at the bottom. And there's a refrigerator car sitting right here in the back, which is kind of fun. But I had to have this structure along with all the signage on it about what costs a slab of pork would run and that sort of thing. This building stood for years and years. In fact, I saw it in the late 1990s. I think it's gone now, but it was around for a long time. And I had to have the Central Sewer Pipe and Supply Company. I love the end of this building, so I had to reproduce it. It's kind of a fun thing to do. And of course, I did some track work that was kind of fun as well. I just had to have some challenges involved here. Bates Building Material is an important structure. A lot of traffic comes in and out of here. You can see the actual Bates building material was just a collage of different buildings, and that's kind of how I put this together. I just kind of cleaned out my my structure drawer and got different wall sections together to put it together. Steubenville Station. This is a pretty recent photograph, kind of a nice dual platform arrangement with an express track here in the front. That's kind of how it looks all together. Now I have another video for you. Hopefully this one will work as well. One of the trains that was important to the area were the oil specials going between Texas, taking crude oil up to New Jersey. And they came through here two a day. And this is one of them. We're actually standing on top of the A&P building taking this video. That's the effect I was looking for. You notice a lot of tank cars have outside vents, the L vents that stick out the sides. That's a 1930s version. You have to file the internal vents off the domes, put those on. There's a mixture at that time. By now the decapod's up on the bridge. Now, the next area we're going to talk about is Mingo Junction. Another one of my cruel realities hit me. The Mingo Tower that most of you guys may have seen is a big brick structure with a flat roof, and that was put up in 1945. Actually 1950. There was a 1945 accident that removed the old wood tower. And I searched and searched for a picture of the old wood tower. This is actually a picture of it. This came along, of course, about 6 months after I had cobbled together a wood tower that I thought it might look like. Of course, it didn't. This is a really strange tower. It had just 2 windows in the front of the balcony and this big blank wall here. Usually you have windows all the way across, but I have the right footprint in terms of size, but it's just certainly nothing like the tower. So that's another challenge for me to do. One of these days I got to get after these wooden towers. Now, Mingo Junction is actually the end of the railroad. This passenger train is coming out of staging right here. This is the backdrop. There's a walkway into the mill here and some other mill buildings, but this is the end of the railroad. Now, Mingo Junction actually is should be about 3 miles away from Steubenville, but I had to squeeze them all together. There's another picture of it here. Mingo Junction Yard is pretty crusty. These are just flats right here. This is partially staging, partially live. I did work on the engine terminal. This is not my engine terminal. This is a picture of the real one. This was probably taken after World War II. Interestingly enough, the Pennsy built these roundhouses. These were, of course, Pennsy had standard everything. These were standard roundhouses. There's one of these in Columbus, Ohio, one in Indianapolis, one in Crestline, or there was. And the way they built them was they built a permanent wall that was this wall right here. It had really nice concrete caps on the pillars and really a nice dressed look to it. And then they built what was called a temporary wall on the other end of it. And the idea was that if you needed to have a bigger roundhouse, you would knock down the temporary wall and add more stalls. Well, what did they do? Well, World War II started, so they built this metal shed over here with an entirely different architecture. Instead of knocking down this temporary wall, they did something entirely different. Who knows why? I have no idea. On the other hand, it's a great picture of engines. If you look at here, look in here, it's very interesting. There's a pile driver right here. There's a Mountain, a 482 right here. And then there's a 280 right here, a consolidation. And all the rest of these engines are decapods. So guess what kind of engines I need to have. So if you're bidding on eBay for a Pennsy decapod, well, you're probably bidding against me. So, although my decapod rampage is almost over, I've got a good number of them now, so it's pretty good. This is a picture of my model section. I used a Walther's turntable and converted it into a Pennsy turntable by moving the control house to the center of the turntable bridge and putting a new bridge on here and different railings. Kind of gives you an idea what that looks like. The engine facilities are relatively compact, but you can get an idea what they look like. There's 4 tracks coming into the table and some wheel tracks and some other junk sitting around. Staging is important. This is staging yards. This is Columbus and West. This is right through Mingo Junction where the passenger train was coming from. This is the staging yard at the west end of the railroad. It's supplemented by 6 long drawers here that will hold about a train and a half. They're huge drawers. And then up above here, if you can see, there are 2 levels. This is Pittsburgh up here and the Scully Yard extension of Pittsburgh. This is how far the railroad climbs in the middle of the room. It's about 20 inches. So I go up 20 inches in about 2 scale miles. I do operate. I use car cards. I use baseball card holder sleeves. They're 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches. And so you can get an idea how that works. A lot of shelves around the layout. This is an old picture because the fascia of the layout was still this well, my wife calls it shit muckle brown. I've since got a charcoal, which is a nicer looking color, but this is the old brown color. I have a sign-up board here for the trains. And when you sign up for a train, you get a set of instructions and then a pack of bills for your train. They're pretty straightforward. Right here at the top is the routing destination. You can just pay attention to that and the car number, and you're going to be golden. I do have one more video of the area here, And I'm going to close with this video. This is the Spirit of St. Louis coming through the area. This will give you a better picture of what the layout kind of looks like. You can see this structure was actually half modeled and kind of cut in two right in the front. This is the Spirit of St. Louis coming through. It does make a stop in Steubenville. Only about a minute long. There we go. That's the end of my tour tonight. Are there any questions? You have to unmute if you're going to ask them. So I'm terrible at lip reading.
One of the things.
How are you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. So how long did it take you to build the whole railroad?
Well, I like to tell visitors that I put it up for Christmas. Not true, of course. Oh, here, let's get this out of here. Really and truly, I started, it was built in two phases, Roger.
Mm-hmm.
We moved into the current house in like 1988. By 1990, I was building the Weirton Junction yard and Weirton Junction interlocking plant. That was all the railroad there was. There was a little staging yard connecting it. And then in 2003, that's when I started building the rest of the railroad, Steubenville, Burgettstown, Hanlon, Collier, the whole double layer area. So it's been, what you're looking at is probably about, started about 18 years ago. Mm-hmm. But it was functional by 2007. I had my first operating session in 2007. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I will never forget that session. It was at the National Convention in 2007. And a very well-known modeler who shall go nameless at this point was operating a train with 30 cars in it. And he was nervous. I don't know why he was nervous. I don't make people nervous, I hope. But he was nervous. And he had that pack of car cards in his hand. And he started squeezing on it. And I don't know why, but he started squeezing and squeezing. Now, I have never seen this happen before. But he created a fountain of car cards that went about 1.5 feet high out of his hands. It was incredible. I thought it was terribly funny. He didn't, of course, but you know, we picked it up and got it in order pretty quick. But it was not a big deal. But it was pretty funny, and that was so. It took me about 4 years to get the railroad in operation, and then I've since been just adding scenery and you know, improving things, adding rolling stock and locomotives and so on. So.
Hey, Bill, I've never known you to be a conspiracy theorist, but you really intrigued me about the theory that the Nazis changed the front end of the Pennsy steam locos.
I'm convinced. I'm just convinced that it was a plot against the American, you know, the spirit. I don't know. Let's make these engines look ugly, you know.
Well, they were sighted off the East Coast, you know, so the
right.
Submarines. So it's entirely possible.
So.
I'm curious about the color of Pennsy trackside buildings in terms of the trim. You know, I always thought it was sort of a dark brown, but I saw one that was sort of a greenish olive color, and I was just wondering whether there was wide variation and weathering and all that. And,
well, there certainly was weathering, but it really, and it may just have been the color rendition of the camera, you know. But David, it should be like a sand color for the primary wall structure, and then a dark brown for the trim, and then the window frames were actually red. So it should be pretty much that, David. You know, if you saw something different, it's probably something I need to go back down there with a paintbrush with, or do some color correcting in Photoshop. So
it's a beautiful layout. Sure,
thank you.
sure comes across.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, David, yours is lovely too. By the way, I've seen yours, so you know, no question. We'll stand
You
here.
know anybody, by the way, who wants to buy any 3-rail O-scale Pennsy engines and rolling stock?
Oh no, thank you very much. If I buy any more rolling stock, my wife is gonna probably you'll read my obituary. So, but thank you. I appreciate the offer, but no, thank you.
No, Bill, one of the things that interested me with your layout is Steubenville, when you had the outside partial building, was that A&P?
There's the A&P building, which is partial. It's on the front edge, but then there's another structure that was in the last video that was on the outside edge too.
Yeah, I saw that.
Just right here.
The A&P always interested me though.
Yeah.
I also thought that was a really neat idea.
Well, an A&P building is on a corner, and it's right where a
Right.
lot of people congregate. And I figured that if I'm going to build a little front of a building there, it was going to have to be pretty sturdy. That thing is made out of 3/4-inch birch plywood, and
Wow.
it's not going to go anywhere. You can lean on it to guys leaning on it with their elbows, and that kind of stuff just happens. It's a human issue. You got to stick your elbow somewhere.
Right.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it kind of made the view down through the tracks, between buildings. You just didn't have buildings on the back of the tracks. You had them on the front of the tracks as well too. That kind of helped the appearance.
Right. One other thing I noticed in a video, the train that was departing the freight yard.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was on the main, but it had on the tender a water scoop. Was that standard on a lot of tenders, even if they weren't, because they didn't have track pans all over, did they? Weren't they just in the flat land?
Well, they had a lot of track pans. They were.
Oh, they did. Okay.
But most of those tenders were built with scoops, which is odd because probably 70% of those engines worked on track that never had a scoop. They never had a water tank.
Right.
But every one of them had that scoop, even the old freight engines, which is kind of funny, but
Yeah.
yeah. So, by the way, I'd like some honest opinion. This is the first clinic I've given that's had video in it. Did you guys like the videos? Did they add to the look of the layout?
I loved it. I think that's the first time I've seen video in a PowerPoint presentation. It looks great.
Did it work out?
How was that?
Thank you. Yeah.
Nicely done.
I liked it.
Nicely done.
Okay. And hopefully you guys are giving me honest answers about this, because this is the first time I've given this clinic with the videos in it.
Yeah, it was
Yep.
good.
There was a little bit of a lag. I mean, it kind of
You can also.
a tad jerky, but not bad.
Yeah. And I think that's just technology. We just don't have the speed yet to do it.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
The other
I didn't
thing
have
I
any
found-
lag on it at all, but then I have a fairly fast connection too.
John, that may be the difference.
Yeah, because I broke down with fiber a couple years ago.
Ah,
The coloring was excellent too, Bill. It was almost like it was in sunlight. Didn't look like it was in a model railroad with heavy lighting. It
Yeah.
was very well done.
I might mention that I have recently redone all the lighting on my layout. I've gone to LEDs with a 4000K heat range. So it's not bright daylight, but it is a warm daylight color. And I've been consistent about adding a lot of LEDs to the layout. These are all these photographs were done with existing lighting on the layout. So including the video camera I used was my phone, of course. It's just
That's
kind
good
of silly
quality.
that stuff has gotten that good.
Yeah.
But
The LEDs, are they light bulbs? Or are they like fluorescent type tubes?
combinations, Andy. I replaced all of my fluorescent fixtures in the ceiling with LED fixtures. Menards had a sale on them, and I found them at 4000K with a pretty good color rendition index.
Right.
And then I went through and I replaced a lot of the plain light bulbs I had at various places with LEDs, and I made sure I got 4000K LED lights. Then I went back and I added to the it's not the fascia, but the valence, excuse me. Yeah, to the valence, I added strip LED lighting also at 4000K. So I put a lot of lighting into the layout. I mean, it's bright down there, but my eyes are getting older, so the brighter the better,
Right.
it helps. Yeah.
Where did you get the 4,000?
There's
They're
a,
kind of hard to find.
no, well, it may be, but I went to a theater lighting organization and I
Okay,
can get 16-foot strips of it with adhesive backing. And you slap it together and just put, you want to put it on something metal because there's some heat to it because we got little transformers all the way along it. So I used drop ceiling angle iron,
oh, okay.
Home Depot.
Yep.
Screwed it up there and then slapped the stuff on there, and it works just absolutely great.
If you
And
don't mind me asking, what do they charge for 16 feet?
I'm trying to remember. I knew that question was coming, Andy, and I don't remember.
Well, you buy the Chinese stuff and they ship it over. Some of it doesn't last very long. And a lot of times they don't tell you what the heat range is in it.
Yeah, this was pretty high quality stuff because it's used in theater productions.
Yeah,
I want to say it was fairly dear. I want to say that it was over $40 for a 16-foot strip.
okay.
Now, that sounds like a lot, but if you think about what you're doing with it and how long it's going to last and what you're spending money on otherwise,
Right.
it was not bad. Most of us don't think two things of it to spend $400 on a brass engine, put $150 worth of decoder and speakers into it, and put on the layout and run it once every 6 months. And this lighting you use every time you go down the layout. Every time you turn the layout on, you turn on this lighting. So why not invest where you're going to need it, where you're going to use it, where you can see it?
Yep.
Because that